Hello folks, welcome back to the countdown to Bond 25. My name is Andrew Fantasia. Thank you so much for tuning in. As usual, if you enjoyed this video, please feel free to give it a thumbs up and give some love to that subscribe button as well. The title of today's movie is an example of something I would like to have as a nickname, but something I would never want to be diagnosed with. We're talking about Thunderball. Let's get started. We have arrived at Thunderball, the 1965 film that was Sean Connery's fourth outing as James Bond. And I'm not going to lie to you folks, this is the first James Bond movie that is not all that great. The first trilogy of Sean Connery films are just impeccably well done. Yes, they have their flaws. Most of those come with the time period they were made in. But those are three movies you could watch again and again and never get sick of. Thunderball, I was sick of after the first time I saw it. But it has its moments, I guess. Spectre is back, its ugly head is looming over everything again, and the plot of Thunderball is as follows. Spectre uses an undercover agent to hijack a NATO jet that is carrying 2 atomic missiles. They steal the missiles and blackmail the British government, saying that if they don't receive a substantial sum of money, they will fire the missiles at either a European or American city of their own choice. The Thunderball theme song is lovingly crooned out of a solid gold microphone by Mr. Tom Jones. The problem with this song, it is very catchy and it does have that wonderful classic James Bond brass riff, you know, that's all throughout that song. Unfortunately, it wasn't written very well, and you can tell they're really struggling to come up with words or phrases that rhyme with Thunderball. Spoilers, there aren't very many. So something tells me Oasis wouldn't have a problem rhyming this. Even though we're 4 movies in, we are still getting quite a few series firsts. For starters, this is the first time they have actually used Sean Connery in the opening gun barrel sting. That's right, that little sting that opens almost every James Bond movie where you see James walk across the screen through the eyes of a gun barrel and then he jumps and points the gun at you and shoots it and blood covers the screen. Yeah, in the first 3 movies, that wasn't Sean Connery. That was just a stand-in because Sean didn't want to do it. Sean was a curmudgeon like that. Eventually, I guess they talked him into it. He was famous enough, people were starting to recognize, hey, that guy in the hat, that wasn't Sean Connery. So they were like, Sean, just do the gun barrel thing, man. Just walk and hop and shoot. And Sean was like, fine, I guess I'll do it. It's actually kind of funny. When he does it, he stumbles a bit and tries to maintain his balance. So see, even Sean Connery isn't a perfect physical specimen, kids. Thunderball is also the first of many movies in which James Bond scuba dives. Yeah, scuba diving became a big thing. We're going to touch more on that later, but essentially around this time, they perfected the use of underwater movie cameras, and directors just thought that was the most scrumptious thing in the world, so they used it as much as they possibly could, and Thunderball got out of control. Again, more on that later. Finally, my favorite first, this is the first appearance of other 00 agents. Yes, James Bond is 007, which stands to reason there are 8 other 00 agents working on Her Majesty's Secret Service as well. Now, throughout the franchise, we barely ever get to know any of them, but this is the first time we have seen any of them in the flesh. But they do something kind of neat here. MI6 calls a meeting where all the 00 agents have to be present, but every time they show James sitting in this circle amongst the other agents, we don't see any of their faces. And it's always covered in an interesting way, whether it's covered by James's own head, or it's covered by one of them reading a dossier, or maybe one of them is just looking bored, so he's sitting like this, and the camera only sees a little bit of the side of his face. They keep the other 00 agents very mysterious. We never really get to know any of them. And I have always been obsessed with the idea of getting to know the other agents. Who are they? I want to know. I am still of the mind that I would love to see spin-offs of this series of other 00 agents. I would love to see like Emilia Clarke play like 008. Come on, wouldn't that be awesome? I know every guy out there who was a Game of Thrones fan who had a crush on Emilia Clarke like I did. You all agree with me right now. She would be a rock star in a role like this. Every time we get mentions of other 00 agents, my ears perk up. I will mention them throughout this retrospective when they come up, but this is our first time seeing them, and it's in this big epic room with all these high back chairs. It is, without a doubt, my favorite part of Thunderball. The gadgets in this movie are a little odd. In the cold open, James Bond uses what might be one of the stupidest gadgets he will ever use, which is a straight up jetpack. He puts on this dorky looking thing, straps it behind him, and it's a jetpack, and he jetpacks away from a place. It's dumb. It's really dumb. I guess even the filmmakers knew how dumb it was, because as we get into the main story and Q shows up to give James his gadgets, they are very low-key, subdued gadgets. He gives him a watch with a Geiger counter in it, an underwater camera, a flare, and a pill with a homing beacon that James Bond swallows so that MI6 can keep tabs on where he is. That's literally it. They are very straightforward things. I guess after the jetpack, somebody in the writer's room was like, hey, let's dial it back a bit. We get two very cool ladies in Thunderball. First, we have Paula Kaplan, a CIA agent who helps out James Bond when he's on his mission in Nassau. Paula is interesting because she is played by an actress named Martine Beswick. You might remember her from 2 movies ago. In From Russia with Love, Martine Beswick played one of those gypsy women in that very uncomfortable cat fight. Well, here, she is a field agent working alongside James Bond, so she's playing a much stronger, less offensive role this time around. However, Paula does not last long. Unfortunately, she is killed by the agents of Spectre, and James moves on to the main leading lady of Thunderball, Dominique Derval. Dominique is played by French actress Claudine Auger, but once again, she's dubbed over by Nikki van der Zyl, the same woman who dubbed over Honey Rider in Dr. No. They really just didn't like using their normal actors' voices. It's a shame I'll never know what Claudine Auger and Gert Frobe actually sounded like. A man can dream, though. Dominique Derval is very interesting, and I'll tell you why. Because she is the one who ends up saving James's life and killing the villain. Back in 1965, this must have been completely unheard of. And even now, in today's day and age, it's very rare in the franchise. This doesn't happen all that often, though it will happen again. At least I think it will. Speaking of villains, who is the villain that she takes out? Well, his name is Maximilian Largo. He's this guy right here. And he works for Spectre, but he's not just any Spectre agent. He is number 2. That's right, Ernst Stavro Blofeld, who shows up in this movie again with a hidden face because it's just cool to hide the villain's face like that. Ernst Stavro Blofeld is number 1. He is the undisputed leader of Spectre, which means Largo is his second in command. He is number 2. Again, Austin Powers connection, number 2 in Austin Powers was based off of Maximilian Largo. Largo owns a yacht called the Disco Volante, which is Italian for flying saucer, so it has nothing to do with disco, unfortunately. And he stores the stolen missiles on this yacht. So it's a very unassuming place. It's just this pleasure yacht that's floating around an island in the Bahamas. It doesn't look like a place where you would hide stolen nuclear weapons, but nah, that's where he's got them, brah. He's hiding them there, right underneath his tiki bar. Like most villains, Largo is a slimy, overgrown man-child who is a sore loser and who just pays women to sleep with him. And really, he's just this pathetic guy. There's not really much cool about him other than the fact that he's got an eye patch. Domino takes him out with a harpoon gun to the back, which is pretty neat, all things considered. And it's nice that she got to take revenge because he had her brother murdered. Don't murder people, kids. Their siblings will get vengeance on you. Miss Fiona Volpe. Fiona Volpe takes great delight in how evil she is. She's just so much fun to watch. She's a seductress, but she's also powerful. She knows exactly what to do in any given situation. It is very hard for James Bond to deal with Fiona Volpe, particularly because she distracts him simply by being a woman. James Bond is easily distracted by a set of nice curves. Fiona almost gets the better of him 3 different times. Maximilian Largo has a very unique death trap set up for James Bond. Actually, you know what? Scratch that. It's not very unique because something very similar is going to happen in Roger Moore's first movie, but we'll get there when we get there. Largo likes to collect sharks. Very dangerous sharks. I can't remember the exact species, but they're supposed to be some of the most bloodthirsty sharks on planet Earth. And he keeps them in a swimming pool. And he feeds them his minions when his minions don't do as well as expected. Well, at one point, James Bond wrestles a minion into a pool, and Largo decides, hey, here's a perfect opportunity. So he closes the top of the pool and then opens a hatch that releases sharks into the pool, and James has to escape them. Now, this is not a very interesting death trap. It's not a particularly tense moment of the movie. He gets out of it fairly easily, but there's a really fun behind-the-scenes piece of trivia to go with this death trap. Sean Connery didn't know he was going to be swimming with live sharks. They didn't tell him that. They just said, hey, Sean, swim around here, and then we're going to superimpose the sharks around you. But they wanted to get a really scary-looking real shot. So without telling their principal actor, they had him swim up to a hatch, and then the hatch opened, and a shark sailed right through, passing within inches of Mr. Bond. Now, in the actual movie, you can tell, if you watch carefully, that Sean Connery is A, surprised that the shark is there, and B, really not happy about it. He jumps back with fright when the shark passes him, and then he points at it. Clearly, the actor is trying to call attention to the crew members to say, hey, what's this shark doing here? I didn't agree to this. Cut. This is not what I signed up for. Just when you thought it was safe to get in the water again, eh, Connery? This is a really funny moment, and if you know to look for it, you are going to enjoy the hell out of it. Speaking of sharks, that's a nice little way to segue into the best quote of the movie. After meeting Dominique Derval, James refers to her by her nickname, Domino. She is puzzled and asks him how on earth he knows that all of her friends call her Domino. James tells her it's because he saw the word on her ankle bracelet. Of course, that's not the real answer. The real answer is because he's a spy, so he read her file, so he knows all about her. But she doesn't know that yet. When he mentions the ankle bracelet, Domino replies, "What sharp little eyes you've got." And James Bond says, "Wait till you get to my teeth." That was well done. So in a movie called Thunderball, it's inevitable that you're probably going to bump into some sexist and racist moments. What was the most sexist or racist in this film? Well, for starters, in the opening credits, I noticed that somebody's job title was listed as, quote, continuity girl. Well, what were they doing in the 60s, man? But no, that's not the worst sin that Thunderball commits. It is very similar, though not quite as bad, as the worst sin committed in Goldfinger. James Bond is at a rehabilitation center and he has a very attractive physiotherapist who he keeps pawing at, and she keeps smacking him away and saying, "Behave yourself, Mr. Bond." Well, she puts him on this spine stretching machine and walks away, and an assassin comes in and turns the machine up to 11 to try to kill James Bond. He blacks out, he almost dies. The physiotherapist rushes back in, sees what's happened, turns the machine off, and saves his life. Now, she doesn't know that there was an assassin. She thought something went wrong with the machine itself. James Bond could say, yeah, some guy just tried to kill me, it's not your fault. But no, he goes ahead and rolls with a lie. He makes her believe, yes, it was her fault, the machine was not properly calibrated, and he basically extorts sex from her. She says, "Please don't tell anybody about this machine, I could lose my job," and he replies by saying, "My silence could come with a price," at which point he leads her into a sauna, and they bang. I just feel like I need to apologize to every woman everywhere just on behalf of the 1960s. I just feel like I need to do that and get that out of the way. Yes, James Bond's penis does get him into trouble time and time again. And in fact, in this movie, it seemed like it was just his primary mode of concern. Like he was thinking with his penis before he was thinking with anything else. As I mentioned, all the 00 agents were assigned to this particular case. James was going to be assigned to some part of the naval something or other. He was going to be assigned to some other corner of the world. But he saw the picture of Dominique Derval, got horny, and literally goes to his boss and says, "Sir, can you change my job so that I go wherever this lady is?" And the boss acquiesced because I guess the movie had to have a plot, so he said yes. Imagine going to your place of work and asking your boss to give you a different assignment strictly because you're horny at the moment. That's what happens in Thunderball. Because he's working with the CIA, we get to see Felix Leiter for the third time and played by the third actor. This actor is named Rick Van Nutter, and he's definitely the most professional Felix that we've met so far. He just flies James Bond around, helps him stake out the area, helps him figure out where the missiles are. He gets the Coast Guard in. This Felix Leiter is a lot more proactive than the other Felixes we've met. What's interesting, though, is that in Thunderball, Fiona Volpe calls out James Bond kind of based on what he does in Goldfinger. Fiona and James Bond sleep together, but Fiona only did it as part of her job, and James only did it as part of his job. But Fiona calls him out on it and says, "Oh, you think you've changed my mind? You think you've driven me away from Spectre? I know your reputation. The great James Bond, he has only to make love to a woman once, and she sees nirvana and changes her ways and converts to the side of good." She is basically making fun of what happened with Pussy Galore in the previous movie. So it's kind of interesting that the franchise itself would call itself out on its own sins, and so soon afterwards, too. Now, unlike Goldfinger, you don't get to hop around the world too much in this one. Thunderball is rooted almost primarily in England and then Nassau, Bahamas, where 90% of the action takes place. 90% of that Nassau action takes place underwater. Yeah, folks, like I said, this is the first of many James Bond scuba diving movies, and they go all out on the scuba diving because they want to take advantage of those underwater cameras. But there's the problem with Thunderball. This movie is 2 hours and 10 minutes long, and about 20 to 25 of those minutes is scuba diving. That's a lot. The big climax showstopper is an underwater battle between the Coast Guard Army and the Spectre Army. It all happens with a bunch of guys in wetsuits, completely interchangeable, completely anonymous looking, just fighting it out underwater with knives and harpoon guns. Oxygen tanks get cut, harpoons get shot, flippers get thrown. This fight is slow, it's plodding, it's tedious, and it goes on and on and on. I actually timed it last night. The fight lasts 10 whole minutes. From the minute our principal characters, James Bond and Maximilian Largo, get into the water to the minute they emerge on land and start speaking again, you have 10 minutes of nothing but fighting underwater very, very slowly. This movie is a chore. It is a chore to get through Thunderball. But now that Thunderball's out of the way, it's smooth sailing ahead. We have 6 awesome James Bond movies ahead of us before the franchise gets a little wonky again, at least as far as my taste is concerned. Thanks for joining me on this dip under the Thunderball waves. Come back again tomorrow, where James Bond will be visiting the Far East and defending a whole new batch of people. See you then.